The box score is a lie. In the modern era of hyper-analytical basketball, we have become obsessed with true shooting percentage, effective field goal rates, and the raw efficiency of a primary scorer. But when Caitlin Clark steps onto a WNBA floor, the traditional spreadsheet dissolves into irrelevance. We are witnessing a statistical anomaly that defies the conventional logic of basketball physics. Imagine a scenario where a player finishes a game shooting a dismal 20% from the field, missing 8 of her 10 attempts from beyond the arc, and yet she is the primary reason her team walked away with a double-digit victory. This is not a fluke, it is the gravity trap. It is a psychological and tactical phenomenon that is rewriting the geometry of the WNBA in real time. Every time Clark crosses the timeline, the floor tilts.
The defense isn't playing the Indiana Fever anymore. They are playing a frantic, desperate game of keep away against a player who demands more defensive attention than any rookie in the history of the sport. We are seeing elite defensive coordinators, veterans who have spent decades neutralizing the league's greatest legends, completely abandon their principles the moment Clark's sneakers touch the logo. They are sending 2, sometimes 3 defenders to the perimeter to stop a player who hasn't made a bucket in 15 minutes. This isn't just basketball, it's asymmetric warfare. The box score says she's struggling, but the film reveals a much more terrifying reality for the rest of the league. Caitlin Clark's misses are becoming Indiana's greatest weapon. To understand why a 20% shooting night from Clark can be more lethal than a 40% night from a standard guard, we have to look back at the historical evolution of defensive architecture in the WNBA.
For the better part of 3 decades, the league was defined by a specific brand of interior dominance and mid-range mastery. The scouting reports for legends like Maya Moore or Diana Taurasi were built around containment and making them work for their shots within the structure of a standard 2-3 zone or a traditional man-to-man scheme. You didn't leave the paint vacated to chase a player 35 feet from the basket because, frankly, the math didn't dictate it. The floor was smaller, the spacing was tighter, and the help side rotation was always anchored within the key. But the arrival of the Clark era has acted as a tectonic shift, cracking the very foundation of these veteran schemes. When Clark was drafted, there was a prevailing narrative among league purists that the physicality of the WNBA would neutralize her range. They expected the welcome to the league moments to be defined by her inability to find space. What they didn't account for was the fear factor.
Veteran coaches are so terrified of Clark hitting 3 consecutive 30-footers and igniting a 12-0 run that they have opted for a burn-the-boats defensive strategy. They are overcommitting to the point of tactical suicide. This historical context is vital because it explains the desperation we see on the sidelines. We are seeing defensive schemes that haven't been used since the peak of the Stephen Curry era in the NBA. Schemes that were designed to stop a singular force of nature at the expense of every other fundamental defensive principle. This brings us into the tactical heart of the matter, the sheer geometry of the 4-on-3 advantage. When a defense decides to blitz or trap a Caitlin Clark pick and roll at the logo, they are making a conscious decision to play the rest of the possession at a numerical disadvantage. This is the gravity trap in its purest form. Let's break down the micro-mechanics of a standard Indiana offensive set. Clark brings the ball up, and Aliyah Boston moves to set a high screen near the logo. In a traditional WNBA defensive set, the big would play drop coverage, staying back to protect the rim, or they would hedge, briefly showing themselves before recovering to the rolling big. However, against Clark, teams are hard hedging or trapping with both the primary defender and the screener's defender. They are forcing the ball out of her hands at all costs. But look at what happens to the floor geometry the moment Clark makes that release pass. Because she is being guarded 30 feet from the rim, the 2 defenders involved in the trap are now completely removed from the play. This leaves 3 defenders to cover 4 Indiana players across the remaining 25 feet of the court. The short roll becomes the most dangerous pass in the Fever's arsenal. When Clark hits Aliyah Boston in that pocket between the logo and the free throw line, Boston suddenly has a 4-on-3 advantage with the ball in her hands and a clear path to the rim or an open shooter in the corner. Clark's 20% shooting doesn't matter because her presence alone has removed the two best defenders from the equation, leaving the defense in a state of perpetual scramble mode. The sophistication of these box-and-one variations being thrown at Clark is unprecedented for a rookie. We are seeing face guarding, where a defender like Nneka Ogwumike or Dejanay Carrington is told to never look at the ball, only to stay within inches of Clark's jersey. This is designed to disrupt her rhythm, but it creates a secondary effect that veteran coaches are failing to mitigate: the empty corner phenomenon. Because Clark is being chased around the perimeter, she often drags her defender into the deep corner, far away from the primary action. By doing this, she effectively turns a 5-on-5 game into a 4-on-4 game played in a massive amount of vacated space. For a post player like Aliyah Boston or a downhill driver like Kelsey Mitchell, this is a dream scenario. The lane is no longer clogged by a help side defender because that defender is glued to Clark on the wing, terrified to leave her for even a millisecond. This is why you see Indiana's role players suddenly having career-high efficiency nights while Clark is struggling. Her gravity acts as a vacuum, sucking the air out of the defensive interior and creating islands for her teammates to exploit. The micro-analysis of her off-ball movement reveals that even when she isn't touching the ball, she is sprinting through a series of staggered screens and flare cuts that force the entire defensive unit to shift their eyes and their feet.
One half step of hesitation from a help side defender, caused by the fear of Clark slipping out to the arc, is all it takes for a backdoor cut to materialize. The ripple effect of this gravity trap is starting to send shockwaves through the league's coaching fraternity. We are seeing a clash of philosophies. On one side, you have the old guard coaches who believe that if you shut down the head of the snake, the body will die. They view Clark's 20% shooting as a victory. But the analytics are starting to tell a different story. The Fever's offensive rating with Clark on the floor, even during her shooting slumps, is often significantly higher than when she sits. This is the ultimate proof of her impact. The league response has been a mix of stubbornness and panic. Teams are beginning to realize that the Clark tax is real. You have to pay a price in energy and defensive integrity just to keep her from getting hot. This is forcing a talent upgrade across the WNBA. Teams are realizing they can no longer hide slow-footed guards or traditional bigs who can't switch onto the perimeter. If you can't navigate a screen 30 feet from the basket, Clark will destroy you. If you trap her and can't rotate in 1.2 seconds, Boston will destroy you. This is the ripple effect. The Clark era is forcing the WNBA to play a faster, more spatially complex game. It is a transition from power basketball to geometric basketball. We are seeing the death of the traditional clogged paint era in real time, as Clark's range forces defenses to stretch until they snap. Furthermore, the psychological toll on opposing defenses cannot be overstated. Basketball is a game of rhythm and confidence. When a team spends 40 minutes sprinting, chasing, and trapping a player who refuses to stop shooting, it wears them down mentally. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from playing Clark defense. It's not just physical. It's the mental strain of knowing that one single mistake, one missed communication on a switch results in a highlight reel three-pointer that brings the crowd to their feet. This psychological pressure causes defenses to over-rotate. We see it constantly in the fourth quarter. A defender will leave a wide-open shooter in the corner to lunge toward Clark, even if she's having an off night. It is an instinctive, fear-based reaction. This is why the Fever are starting to win games late. The defense is mentally fried from the constant gravity she exerts. They are so focused on the threat of Caitlin Clark that they lose sight of the reality of the game. This is the hallmark of a generational superstar. Like Curry, Clark doesn't need to make the shot to win the possession. She just needs to exist in a way that makes the defense believe she might make the shot. The climax of this evolution is the realization that the Indiana Fever have cracked the code.
Early in the season, they looked lost, unable to capitalize on the 4-on-3 advantages Clark was creating. But as the chemistry has built, the verdict is becoming clear. The gravity trap is the most potent offensive weapon in the league. When Aliyah Boston catches the ball in the short roll and immediately looks for the X-cut or the hammer screen on the weak side, that is the Fever exploiting the trap. When Kelsey Mitchell uses the chaos of a Clark double team to drive into an empty lane, that is the system working. The final hot take is this: Caitlin Clark's shooting percentage is the least important stat in her box score. Her gravity score, the number of times she forces a second defender to leave their assignment, is the true metric of her greatness. We are moving toward a future where efficiency is redefined. A player who shoots 20% but draws a double team on every possession is infinitely more valuable than a player who shoots 50% but can be guarded straight up.
The veteran coaches who are backfiring are those who refuse to adapt. They are playing checkers in a game that Clark has turned into three-dimensional chess. By sticking to the box and one, by refusing to trust their individual defenders, they are handing the Fever the keys to the kingdom. They are so intent on winning the matchup against Clark that they are losing the war against the Fever. The gravity trap is not just a trend, it is the new standard of WNBA basketball. It is the reason why Indiana is winning games they have no business winning based on shooting percentages alone. It is the reason why the floor looks bigger when Clark is on it. And it is the reason why, even on her worst shooting night, Caitlin Clark remains the most dangerous person in the building. The league thought they were ready for her range. They weren't ready for her gravity. They thought they could stop her by taking the ball out of her hands. They didn't realize that by taking the ball out of her hands, they were opening the floodgates for an entire roster to feast on the space she leaves behind. The trap is set, and the rest of the league is walking right into it. Whether she's 0 for 10 or 10 for 10, the result is becoming the same. The defense is out of position, the geometry is broken, and the Indiana Fever are moving one step closer to dominance. This is the new reality of the WNBA. This is the power of the gravity trap. The era of the logo threat has officially arrived, and the scouting reports will never be the same again. The math has changed, the rules have shifted, and the only certainty is that as long as Caitlin Clark is on the floor, the defense is exactly where they want them, trapped in her orbit, spinning out of control, and losing the game one double team at a time.